Every morning for nearly a year, Claire Hutchins woke up and felt like she was dying. Her hands trembled before she got out of bed. Her stomach turned before she even sat up. She had lost 14 pounds in 8 months. Her hair was coming out in clumps in the shower drain. Her skin had gone gray, then waxy, then something worse than either. She went to her primary care doctor in October. He ran blood panels. He said stress. She went back in December. He ran more tests. He said anemia, maybe. He adjusted her iron supplements and sent her home. She went back in February. Her liver enzymes were elevated. He referred her to a gastroenterologist. The gastroenterologist found nothing conclusive. He mentioned the possibility of an autoimmune disorder. He put her on a waiting list for a specialist. The waiting list was 4 months long. Through all of it, through every appointment and every inconclusive result and every terrifying new symptom, one person was always there, her best friend, Natalie. Natalie was the first one Claire called after every doctor visit. Natalie was the one who researched symptoms online and printed out articles. Natalie was the one who showed up to Claire's apartment with groceries, with supplements, with herbal tea blends she had specially ordered because she said they were good for inflammation. Natalie held Claire's hair back when she vomited. Natalie sat with her through the worst nights. Natalie told her it was going to be okay. Natalie was the one putting poison in the tea. She had been doing it for almost a year. Small doses, consistent, careful. Just enough to keep Claire sick without killing her. At least that was the plan. My name is Danny Cruz. I cover true crime. I cover the cases that disturb me most, not because they involve violence from strangers, not because they involve random acts of evil, but because they involve the destruction of trust. The cases where the person standing closest to you, holding your hand while you suffer, is the reason you are suffering at all. Those are the cases I cannot let go. This is one of those cases. If this is your first time here, subscribe, hit the bell. I drop new cases every week. And when you reach the end of this one, I want you to leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever had someone in your life that, looking back, you realize was not who you thought they were? Because I think a lot of people watching this right now have. Let's start at the beginning. Claire and Natalie met in college. They were assigned to the same dormitory floor their freshman year. 2 different majors, 2 completely different backgrounds, but something clicked immediately. Claire was studying nursing. Natalie was studying psychology. They were both from small towns. They were both the first in their families to go to university. That shared experience of arriving somewhere big and feeling slightly out of place, it bonded them in a way that only the earliest friendships can. By sophomore year, they were roommates. By junior year, they had the kind of friendship that people write about in memoirs. The kind where you can sit in silence for an hour and it doesn't feel awkward. The kind where you know each other's family histories, childhood wounds, embarrassing secrets. The kind where you've seen each other at rock bottom and still chosen to stay. Natalie was the kind of friend who remembered everything. She remembered the name of the boy who broke Claire's heart in 10th grade. She remembered the anniversary of Claire's mother's death. She remembered which topic would send Claire into anxiety spirals and which words would calm her down. There is a word for that level of attunement. Most people would call it love. They would not be wrong. But there is another word for it too. The right word becomes clear later. After graduation, they settled in the same city. Not because they had to, because they chose to. Claire got a job at a regional hospital. She worked long shifts. She came home exhausted. Natalie worked at a private therapy practice. She counseled clients dealing with anxiety, relationship trauma, depression. She was, by all accounts, very good at her job. When Claire started dating Marcus, Natalie was the first person she told. When Marcus proposed, Claire called Natalie before she called her own mother. And when it came time to plan the wedding, there was never any question about who would stand beside her. Natalie was her maid of honor. She planned the bachelorette trip. She coordinated the bridesmaids. She gave a speech at the rehearsal dinner that left half the room in tears. She was present, devoted, warm, and exactly what a best friend is supposed to be at the most important moment of your life. The wedding was in June. By October, Claire was sick. It started small. Fatigue that seemed beyond what long nursing shifts could explain. Nausea in the mornings that had no obvious cause. She chalked it up to post-wedding stress, to the adjustment of settling into married life, to the general exhaustion of a body that had been running at high capacity for years. But by November, it was worse. The trembling in her hands became noticeable at work. She dropped a tray of instruments. She had to ask a colleague to cover the end of a shift. That had never happened before. Claire was not the kind of person who asked for help. The stomach pain arrived in December. Not cramping, not the ordinary kind of discomfort, a deep, persistent, gnawing pain that sat in her upper abdomen and didn't move. She went to urgent care on a Thursday night. They gave her antacids and told her to follow up with her doctor. She followed up. The blood work came back with elevated liver enzymes and a slightly low white cell count. The doctor said it was probably nothing serious. He adjusted her diet recommendations. He suggested she cut out alcohol and processed foods. He said, "Come back in 6 weeks." She came back in 6 weeks. The numbers were worse. Through all of this, Natalie was a constant presence. She had a key to Claire's apartment. She had always had one. They had exchanged keys years ago as a practical measure, the kind of thing close friends do. Natalie used that key regularly. She would come by while Claire was at work and leave things: groceries, notes, and the tea. Natalie had started bringing the tea in November. She said she had been researching natural remedies for fatigue and immune support. She brought specific blends. She made a point of preparing them correctly: the water temperature, the steeping time. She brought them in a thermos sometimes, so they would still be warm when Claire got home from a long shift. Claire drank them gratefully. She told Marcus that Natalie was the best friend she had ever had. She was not wrong about the friendship. She was catastrophically wrong about the tea. Natalie was adding thallium to the blend. Thallium is a heavy metal. It was historically used as a rat poison before it was banned for commercial use in many countries. It has a dark history in true crime. It has been called the poisoner's poison because it is colorless, nearly tasteless, and dissolves cleanly in liquid. Symptoms of thallium poisoning mimic a wide range of common illnesses: hair loss, gastrointestinal pain, neurological symptoms, liver and kidney damage. It is slow. It is insidious. And unless a doctor specifically orders a heavy metals toxicology screen, which they rarely do without cause, it will not show up in standard blood work. Natalie knew this. She had researched it carefully. The psychology background gave her the patience to be methodical. She understood behavior. She understood how to manage perceptions. And she understood exactly how to maintain the role of concerned friend while administering the poison. The dosing was deliberate. Too much at once, and Claire would have ended up in an emergency room getting a full workup. Too little, and the effect would not sustain. Natalie kept it in what she clearly calculated as a maintenance range. Enough to keep Claire dependent, enough to keep Claire sick, enough to keep Natalie necessary. The months continued. January brought new symptoms: a tingling in Claire's feet that her doctor attributed to possible early-stage neuropathy. February brought a second referral, this time to a neurologist. March brought a terrifying episode where Claire lost feeling in her left hand for nearly 40 minutes. Marcus was frightened. He pushed harder for answers. He accompanied Claire to her appointments. He asked pointed questions about what else could be tested. The neurologist ran an MRI. It came back clean. She did not have MS. She did not have a detectable neurological lesion. The neurologist was puzzled. He said the neuropathy symptoms were real, but the cause was unclear. He suggested stress. He said, "Come back in 3 months." Natalie continued bringing the tea. The discovery did not come from a doctor. It came from a moment of intuition, and from Marcus. Marcus had been watching his wife deteriorate for months. He had listened to doctors give vague answers. He had watched her go from a strong, sharp, capable woman to someone who struggled to open a jar. One evening in April, he noticed that Claire's worst days had a pattern. They often followed evenings when Natalie had visited. They often followed the tea. He did not confront anyone. He did not accuse anyone. He did something much more careful. He began keeping a log. He wrote down dates, what Claire had consumed, who had visited, and how she felt in the following 24 hours. He kept this log for 3 weeks. The correlation was not perfect. Natalie did not poison every batch, which may have been intentional on her part, a way to obscure the pattern, but the correlation was strong enough. Strong enough that Marcus called Claire's gastroenterologist directly. He did not go through Claire. He called the office himself, identified himself as the spouse, explained his concerns, and asked a specific question. Was there any way that Claire's symptoms could be consistent with heavy metal poisoning? The gastroenterologist paused on the phone. Then he said he would order the test. A hair sample was taken at Claire's next appointment. Hair is a remarkable record of what a body has been exposed to over time. Unlike blood, which clears toxins relatively quickly, hair preserves a timeline. Each centimeter of hair represents roughly a month of growth. The sample from Claire's hair showed elevated thallium levels across an 8-month window. It was not trace contamination. It was not environmental exposure. The levels were consistent with repeated ingestion. The gastroenterologist called Marcus first. Then he called Claire. Then he called the police. The investigation moved quickly once the toxicology report was in hand. Detectives obtained a warrant and executed a search of Natalie's apartment. In the search, they found thallium compounds concealed in the back of a bathroom cabinet, stored in a small amber glass bottle, labeled in Natalie's own handwriting with a date from the previous September. That date was 2 months before Claire became visibly ill. Her laptop was seized. Her search history was extensive and damning. Searches beginning in late August of the prior year. Thallium toxicity doses. Thallium half-life in hair. Thallium detection window. Thallium symptoms mimicking autoimmune disease. Thallium availability online. She had ordered the compound through a chemical supply website using a false professional credential. Her phone showed a pattern of texts to Claire that investigators described as emotionally controlling. Natalie consistently steered Claire away from second opinions. She sent articles suggesting Claire's illness was psychosomatic, stress-induced, linked to post-wedding adjustment. In one message, she told Claire that sometimes our bodies express what our minds refuse to feel, and that perhaps what she needed was not more doctors, but more rest and more connection. She offered to come over. She brought the tea. When detectives brought Natalie in for questioning, she was calm, composed. She expressed concern for Claire. She cried at what she described as the horror of hearing what someone had done to her best friend. She asked if she could go be with Claire. She offered to help in any way she could. She did not know they already had the hair sample results. She did not know they had already been in her apartment. When the detective placed the amber bottle on the table between them, Natalie went silent. Her expression shifted in a way that the detective later described in his report as the moment the performance ended. She asked for a lawyer. The question investigators spent considerable time on was motive. Thallium poisoning is not a crime of passion. It is not impulsive. It requires planning, research, sustained effort, and ongoing deception. It requires the perpetrator to maintain a false emotional performance for months. Why would someone do this to her closest friend? The answer, when it emerged, was both simple and deeply disturbing. Natalie was in love with Marcus. The relationship had not been physical. There was no affair, no explicit declaration, nothing that Claire had ever noticed or that Marcus had consciously registered as anything unusual. But Natalie's own journals, also seized during the search, documented an obsession that had been building for years. She had been present at the beginning of Marcus and Claire's relationship. She had watched it develop. She had been the maid of honor at their wedding. And something had broken in her at that wedding, not suddenly but gradually, in the weeks and months that followed. Her journals described a plan. Not impulsive, not emotional, a plan. If Claire became seriously ill, Marcus would need support. Natalie would provide it. If Claire became dependent, if the marriage became strained under the weight of illness, if Marcus began to feel helpless and isolated, Natalie would be there. She had calculated that she could position herself as indispensable. She had calculated that proximity and patience and the erosion of Claire's health would eventually open a door. She had not calculated getting caught. The trial lasted 11 days. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. The toxicology results, the hair sample timeline, the search history, the chemical purchase records, the journal entries, the amber bottle, the pattern of texts, the key to Claire's apartment, the expert witness who explained, clearly and without ambiguity, exactly what chronic thallium poisoning does to a human body. The defense argued contamination. They argued that the thallium could have entered the tea through environmental exposure. They argued that the journal entries were the private writings of a troubled woman, not evidence of criminal intent. They argued that correlation was not causation. The jury took less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts: poisoning with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, conspiracy, unlawful entry, fraud in obtaining controlled substances. Before sentencing, Claire was given the opportunity to speak. She stood in the courtroom and she looked at Natalie directly. She said she had spent months trying to understand how this was possible. She said she had replayed every memory she had of their friendship and looked for signs she had missed. She said she had found some, small things, looking back. Moments where Natalie had subtly steered decisions. Moments where Natalie's help had come with invisible strings. Moments where Claire had felt vaguely managed without being able to name why. She said the worst part was not the illness. She had recovered, with treatment, over the course of 6 months. The neurological symptoms had faded. The hair had grown back. Her liver function had returned to near normal. She said the worst part was the rewriting. She said it felt like going back through every chapter of her life that included Natalie and discovering that the story was different than she had believed, that the warmth had been partially real and partially calculated, that the trust had been used as a tool. She said she grieved the friend she had thought she had. She said she grieved her in the way you grieve someone who has died, except this was worse, because the person had never fully existed in the first place. Natalie received a sentence of 16 years. She showed no visible reaction when the number was read. What this case does to me, and I have sat with a lot of cases, is that it collapses the distance we usually keep between ourselves and the victim. Most crime, we can tell ourselves that something about the circumstances doesn't apply to us. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong neighborhood, wrong choices. We build a wall. We say that won't be me. This case doesn't allow that wall, because every single one of us has someone in our life we trust completely, someone who has a key, someone who knows our history, our vulnerabilities, our patterns, someone whose care we accept without question because we have experienced it as genuine for so long. And we would be right to trust them. In almost every case, we would be right. But this case is a reminder of what trust requires and what it costs when it is violated at that depth. It also raises a question I want you to sit with. How often do we perform wellness? How often do we tell people we are fine and let them keep coming with the tea? Claire's body was telling her something was wrong for months. The doctors weren't listening closely enough, and the one person positioned to hear her most clearly was the one causing the damage. If you are sick and the answers don't add up, push. Ask for the unusual tests. Advocate for yourself. And if the pattern of your illness correlates with a specific person's presence, pay attention to that. I am not saying live in paranoia. I am saying your instincts matter. Drop a comment. Tell me if this case affected you the way it affected me. Tell me if you've ever had a friendship that, looking back, felt like it was costing you something you couldn't quite name. I read every comment. I respond when I can. Subscribe if you haven't. Every new case gets posted here first. Hit the bell so you don't miss it. I'm Danny Cruz. I'll see you on the next one.